So the Taipei mission, so in Taiwan there's two missions, and it's kind of split in half. But the Taipei mission kind of covers the north side of Taiwan and also the east coast. Because of a mountain range, it makes it hard to split it right in half. And so our mission covered the north and the east is one of the prettiest places in the world. It's kind of like the Taiwanese Hawaii in a way. There's beach, there's green mountains. It's a very pretty area, and that area is actually a district right now. They're working on that becoming a stake. That was the only district in our mission. Other than that, it's all stakes and pretty developed wards. There's a temple in our mission, which I think helps a lot, and the members are awesome. The church is still relatively new there. And so they're still learning a lot in terms of member missionary work. But it is a great mission, and the people are also really receptive, super nice. I think Taiwan is probably the safest place in the world, I would guess. I'm not sure. But as far as languages and culture, the food is amazing. We actually, most of our time we would eat breakfast inside, but because the food is so cheap outside, we'd eat lunch and dinner both outside on the street. Lots of rice and noodles, and some more rice, some more noodles, but it's all super good. And everyone speaks Mandarin, but also there are people that speak Taiwanese. It's a dialect of Chinese, and it's more predominant among the older generation, but the younger people will also speak it to communicate with their grandparents. But for me, I was never in a situation where I was facing someone that didn't speak Mandarin, and that's what they teach you in the MTC, is just Mandarin. You may pick up a couple Taiwanese words here and there, but yeah, it's mostly going to be Mandarin. Most of the units are pretty decent size. However, there are lots of less active members. In a number of wards that I served in, there was there was a couple hundred less active members, whereas probably only about 60 or 70 active members. And so there's lots of reactivation efforts going on. But yeah, the church is pretty developed, I think, for how new it is there. I believe the church has only been in Taiwan for about 50 years. And it's interesting, the mission president will also take all the new missionaries to the dedication site where Taiwan was dedicated for the preaching of the gospel. And China was actually dedicated as well for the preaching of the gospel, but then Taiwan was dedicated again. And there's lots of things, the missionaries going there, hopefully they get a chance to read those prayers, because there's lots of interesting promises that the prayer offerer makes to the missionaries and to those serving in Taiwan.
They have 11 stakes from what I last heard. And when my mission president served there 35 something years ago, I think it was, there was one stake. And so there's grown 10. And they have, I remember going to state conferences where in 2020 and 2030, they have plans to have 1 to 2 more temples, with growing almost double in size in the church. So that was a pretty exciting thing that I really want to happen, because I was there. We had most of the southwest half of the island, and then the northeast half was the Taipei mission. And the temple was in Taipei, and then the next one is going to be in Kaohsiung, which is in the southern half. And there's a stake center just right next to it. And the Lord provides the way for the grounds of his temple, because it's in a very ideal place. And it's right next to this huge stake center. So you can just feel like the sense of the work happening there. And from what I've heard, the Taipei mission has a lot more city areas. And they have some really rural areas too. But a lot of them are in the big city of Taipei, because it's huge and there's so many people. So I think they have lots of areas there. Whereas the Taichung mission, there's not as many big city areas. There's a lot more like small town places. Well, not small town, but only 10,000 people. But to them, that's tiny. So that was kind of an interesting like cultural feeling, going from a city of like 250,000 to a city of 10,000. Just felt like an immense drop, and the way you'd contact people would change, the way you'd go tracting or something like that. Church history-wise, I think they got the first missionaries were there in the 50s, and something interesting they pointed out is that Taiwan started having better economic growth as soon as the church started there, and the more the church has developed there, the more Taiwan has developed. So I think that's been kind of like an interesting blessing from the Lord to the people there. The more they're accepting the word, the more their country is growing. So I thought that was really cool. So my first area was Jiayi, and I served there for 6 months. And then my second area was Tainan Dongqu, where I was there for, I think it was 4.5 months. And then my third area was Dali, which is up in Taichung. The other two areas were more in the south. And then I was only there for 6 weeks before I moved down to Gangshan, which I served there for 6 months as well. And that was in the south. And then Qishan was the neighbor to it. And I served there for about 3 months. And then I served in my last area, which was Daya, which was up in Taichung, for about 3 months. Jiayi was about 250,000, and so it was a pretty decently sized city. For them, that was kind of moderate, and I really loved it because it had a small town but a big town feel to it. Because where we lived, buildings were only 14 stories tall, where when we went into the city, it got up to like 30, 40, 50 stories. So you could kind of have that smaller feel, but then go into a bigger one. There was lots of schools, lots of people everywhere to talk to. And then in Gangshan, it was a little bit smaller. I don't know what the population was, but I kind of liked that one because it felt a little bit bigger, but still small. I kind of like that combination where if it was like straight in the big city, there's kind of just like an attitude difference. And there are certain missionaries that thrived in either one. I really liked the big small town feel.
Just first off, so Taiwan is kind of shaped like a hand, like pretty spot on. And Taichung Mission is the southern west half. There's a mountain range right here, so they kind of split it between the mountain range and the north. And the other stuff is Taipei's, and the rest is ours. And so the church has been there 60 years this year. So it's still a newer mission area. They sent 4 missionaries back in 60 years ago. They sent 4 missionaries, and those missionaries got there, and there wasn't very much success. They tried contacting, they tried tracting, they tried a lot of things. No one was really accepting them. They weren't getting any baptisms. I think it lasted up until a year of just nothing. And in fact, one of the missionaries died. He got in a car accident, which at that point the other 3 were like, what are we doing? Like, why are we here? We should probably just go home. Like, we're not doing anything. And then they discussed it. They prayed about it, and they're like, no, there is work out here. We need to be here still. And shortly after that, baptism just flowed like crazy into Taiwan. I mean, it's only been 60 years. Most of the members are either first or second generation. There's very few third generation members. Like I wouldn't guess above 1,000 if that. There's 50,000 members in Taiwan total right now. 11 stakes, 12. They just went up 1. They have 12 stakes, and so from that time it kind of just started going well. Baptisms followed, but most recently in the past 10 years is when 15 years is when a lot of changes happened. Taiwanese tend to be predominantly Taoist or Buddhist. that's what they say. That's what the religion has been for a long time. The problem is a lot of the rising generation doesn't really know what that means. They don't know really what Taoism believes. They don't know what Buddhism believes. They don't really know why they go and worship their ancestors. They just know that their parents have done it, their parents have done it, so on and so forth, and that's why they do it. And so I think more recently, a lot of the Taiwanese have been curious about Christianity. What is this religion that all the Westerners believe, that now they're coming here and trying to share it with us? Why? Like, what's the big deal? And they're a little bit curious because there's a lot more devoutness in the Western hemisphere of religion than there is in Taiwan. There's still some very religious people, but for the most part, they're just kind of like going through the motions. So within the last 15 years especially, there's been a huge amount of success for the church. Just a lot of people turning to the church, getting baptized, joining. There's a lot of excitement about it. Everyone in Taiwan knows who the missionaries are. They know us as the people who ride on bikes and contact everyone. So right now, I think I got it wrong again. I think it's 13 now, because when I got to the Taiwan Taichung mission, there was 11 stakes on the entire island of Taiwan. And Taipei mission got another stake right when I was leaving, and within the last few months, they've added another one to our mission. So I think there's 13 stakes. There's one district in our mission, the Jai district, and then I think Taipei only has one district as well. They might have two, but I'm pretty sure it's only one. So it's growing. There's a lot of stakes. There's obviously a few branches in every stake. There's probably at least one branch in every stake. But they're very centralized. The cities are very compact, so it's really easy for when people are joining the church, they're joining already in an area, and so it makes it very convenient for the ward that they're already so close. So that's probably how they've done so well at making these stakes and the stakes and the wards, and that's what most of the help in that situation has been. And then with teaching Buddhist and Taoist background people was definitely a different situation. A lot of my mission buddies, we always make that joke, because in the back of Preach My Gospel, in chapter 7 on learning a language, it has an activity. It says, imagine that you're teaching someone who does not have a Christian background. And it's always funny because it's like, okay, this is basically what I do every day. And it's definitely harder to just go diving into the first lesson. Just go and teach everything from God is your loving Heavenly Father to the Book of Mormon and prayer, and get everything, all the details that you want to get in. If they haven't heard of God really, or if they don't really have an understanding of the Bible, or, I mean, no one's going to know what a prophet really is. They've never even heard that word, or priesthood, or there's just a lot of those words that they just haven't heard. Let alone when you bring up the story about Joseph Smith, a boy who became a prophet, he saw God, he got gold plates. It's a lot of information for them to process. So usually you just try and start out very simple at first. Just try and figure out, do they believe in God? Do they not believe in God? If they do believe in God, what kind of God do they believe in? Do they believe he's a bunch of people? Do they believe it's just one? How do they feel about the Christian's view of God? And then we start to teach them, well, here's what we believe. We do know that God is our loving Heavenly Father. We explain to them that, they have an earthly father for their body, there's a father of their spirits. And we try and use a lot of object lessons to try and help them understand concepts like that. And then as we teach it, we'll double check with them. So, what do you think of that? How does that sound to you? Do you believe it? Do you want to know if that's true? And then as we do that, we kind of continue and kind of do the same thing through each point. Just it's more of a slow, making sure they understand what they're getting taught. But if you focus, if you're good at, if you teach very simply, it actually is very possible to teach them the first lesson in the first meet. It's just you wouldn't teach them deeply the first lesson in the first meet. Mm-hmm. There's a couple commandments and commitments that were definitely a completely new thing for them that was usually a huge focus, and almost every weekly planning session you'd have several investigators that you were trying to hit that commitment. And usually it was the Sabbath day observance, in general, going to church. And another one was, it was word of wisdom and Sabbath day observance. Those are probably the two biggest ones that it was always a little bit worrisome when you're getting to it. You're like, okay, how are they going to take it? They're going to have to go to church. But like, because for most of Taiwan, they're not Christian. Most of them are not Christian, so they haven't had a habit of going to church every Sunday. Taoism Buddhism isn't really organized in observance manner. They don't say, okay, you have to go this day, or you have to go once every so often. It's kind of just when you feel you need help, go to the Buddhist temple and feel peace. And so when we introduce this idea that God tells us on Sunday, you're not supposed to work, you have to go to church, it's kind of a new thing for them. Definitely, if they don't understand the commandment, they complain. They're like, no, I don't want to. They'll throw up excuses, especially because it's a completely different thing. Like, they've never been inside of a church, and now you're telling them that they're going to have to go to a meeting and people are going to be there and they don't know what's really happening. It's kind of to them, it's almost the same feeling as someone who's about to go through the temple. They don't know what's inside the temple, but they know that there's going to be people there. They know that something happens. And so they're kind of nervous. That's actually a really good example of how the Taiwanese probably feel about what church is. And so normally we try and give them a tour of the chapel before Sunday. We talk about what actually goes on. We're like, okay, so like up there, someone will give a talk. They'll speak. It's not a preacher. It's just a normal member who just has had experiences and they've been invited to share some experiences. We sing songs. Taiwanese love to sing, so it's usually a good selling point. Then we also tell them, and then there's prayer, and then they have this, something we call a sacrament, and it's just some bread and water to help us remind us of Jesus Christ, because he died for us. And normally, if you have a good experience like that, you go over that. They're usually willing to try coming to sacrament meeting once. And if they have a good experience there, you can get them a second time. And it's just a matter of helping them develop that testimony of, okay, like, church is good, it's not scary, it's not inconvenient. Definitely it's a new thing, trying to get them to like get Sundays off, or finding jobs that don't involve Sunday working, because most people aren't Christian, most jobs don't have that as an option. It's not a Monday through Friday, sometimes it's Tuesday through Sunday, or sometimes it's Sunday through Thursday. They just have weird schedules because they have no reason to have Sunday specifically off. And then word of wisdom, they love their tea. Drinking, yes, there's people that drink. Lots of guys smoke, but most people are able to quit that when they start believing they have developed that testimony. Those ones aren't too bad. Tea, though, is such a culture thing. I mean, it's just something that you go into someone's home, they give you tea. You go to a party, there's tea. You go buy food, they have free tea, but anything else you have to pay for. And so it's really something that like they don't know what to do, especially because it's disrespectful to refuse tea. You can't say, oh, no, I don't want tea. I mean, us missionaries, it's easy for us to refuse it. One, we're American. Two, we have a religious proof right here that says like, oh, no, we can't. They just assume, oh, they're missionaries, like that's their thing. But it's very rude for someone to say, no, I don't want your tea. So you have to teach them some skills, just like, okay, like you don't drink it. They set it on your table, you don't drink it. They won't give you tea ever again after that. But it's still that I have to say no to people. They're very scared of doing that. And so it's something that you have to help them realize benefits over the costs. Like, do they want all the blessings of baptism and being a member of the church, or do they prefer getting respect of someone who do they want to just please someone because they drink tea? And usually the general principle with almost any commandment, any investigator, is if they really do develop that testimony, anything else really is under the water. They can usually when they're complaining and they don't want to live a command, it's usually more of a testimony issue than it is a commandment issue. Especially with this one, like it's usually just once they realize what they actually want, it's a lot easier to give up the social sacrifices. So I served in the Taiwan Taichung mission March of 2013 to March of 2015. So I arrived in May because of MTC. And so in May I started in Gangshan. It's just a small suburb off of the southern city of Kaohsiung. And then my second area, I got transferred to Zhongming. It's not even a city, it's more of just a couple streets within Taichung. A lot of the Taichung areas are going to be a lot smaller. So Zhongming, when I would tell non-members, I'm going to Zhongming, most of them were like, where's that? So it's just the southern little chunk of the Taichung city. And then after Zhongming, I got transferred to Guiren. Guiren is a very countryside, it's not quite a city, just out of Tainan. Tainan's the bigger city. That's how Taiwan's separated, is by cities. And so it's just a small little section of that. And I was there for probably 8 months, and then after Guiren, I got moved to the center of Kaohsiung City in a ward called Qianzhen. And that one was a completely different change. And then after Qianzhen, I was sent to Pingdong, which is the southernmost tip of Taiwan.
So the Taichung mission is the east and southern part of Taiwan. And the Taipei mission is the north and west. I'm sorry, I said that backwards. Can I start over?
Sure.
Okay, so Taichung is the west and southern part of the island of Taiwan. And so there's three big cities in Taiwan. There's Taipei, Taichung, and Kaohsiung. Those are the three biggest. And so Taichung, that's where the mission home is, and the mission office. And that's kind of near the top of the mission. And then Kaohsiung is the second biggest city in Taiwan, and it's near the bottom. And so probably most missionaries are located in those two areas. So it's the whole mission is bordered by coast. There's only one county in our mission that's landlocked, and the rest are near the ocean. So, and most areas, I would say, even touch the ocean. And so that was a typical preparation day activity, was to bike out to the ocean and just take a look. When I was in Taiwan, the church reached its 100th unit, and that was really special. I think that includes stakes and wards and branches. And I know at one point, I think there was only one branch or maybe 0 branches in all of Taiwan, and that every branch had become a ward. In the Taichung mission, they're trying to create a new stake, though. So I know they took some wards from neighboring stakes and created a district of it. And so there's branches there, but they're all staffed by members who are branch presidents. I remember my first ward I went to had about 120 members in the ward, and I remember asking my trainer, don't mean not to talk in.
Oh, you're good.
Okay, just so this ward had 127 members, and that were active, and I thought that would be a small ward, and I asked my trainer about that, and he said that was probably the biggest ward in all of Taiwan. And so most wards probably, at a minimum have like 60 to 70 people, and max about 100 to 110 people. So it's not typical to maybe what we'd see in Utah or other states in the United States.